Buckeye Talk at Ohio State football's first practice of the spring. I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com, along with Stephen Means and Doug Lesmerises. We already broke down the offense. We're talking defense now. What our big takeaways were from what is obviously the biggest question going into the season is how this defense gets revamped under Jim Knowles, who we talked to today, and under new position coaches Tim Walton and Perry Eliano. I'm going to talk about the defensive line up front because one of the big questions people have is this hybrid, end linebacker position that Jim Knowles has used in the past. They are going to use that, but he said today they've started practice in just sort of a conventional four down front, a rush end, another defensive end, a three tech, and a nose tackle, and they're going to eventually implement that position, whatever you want to call it, the Leo, the Jack. It's going to come, but it's not going to come until after spring break. Seems like they've sort of segmented practice a little bit. Ryan Day said it was kind of an OTA-style thing this week. Then you take a week off for spring break, and you come back at it in maybe a more conventional format. But they're missing some guys this spring up front. Tyler Friday's not going to practice this spring. Jacoby Cowan's not going to practice this spring. Zach Harrison was working off to the side today because there's some guys that are going to be bouncing in and out. So the defensive front is still, I think, very much in flux. But guys that I know you're curious about, JT Tuimoloau was here today looking the part. Jack Sawyer was here today. And it's going to be interesting to see how those guys develop as we go along over these 16 practices, 15 practices, however many they have left towards the spring game on April 16th. Stephen, what is your takeaway on the defensive side of the ball?
We'll talk about the cornerbacks. Obviously, Denzel Burke's a starting cornerback, and every time we've gotten an opportunity to talk to somebody about who else is next behind them, the names Jalen Johnson and Jordan Hancock have been brought up. And so I'm not going to sit here and do the hype train situation with that because we're going to be doing that enough over the next 9 months. But I do think in a situation where Denzel Burke used spring practice and the fact that there were so many veterans or guys coming back who were out to gain some much-needed experience, and it put him kind of ahead of those guys on the fast track of development, I think those two might catch up if they're healthy now that they've gotten the chance to go through a winter workouts and go through a spring. I'm not totally sure that a year from now we're going to be all sitting here thinking that Denzel Burke's the best corner of those three. I think both of those two guys being top 100 recruits, getting a chance to go through the offseason the way they are, the way people have talked about them so far, we might be in a situation where Denzel Burke's the third best of that group, and that should be a good thing for Ohio State.
Doug, your big takeaway on defense today?
And I thought it was important. Knowles did sort of mention Johnson and Hancock as guys who had good off seasons, right? That it's like, hey, they're highly recruited guys. They weren't here for the spring, but hey, they took care of business this off season, which goes to your point.
And actually, Day said specifically they and I think who was the other one? Jaden Ballard were among the guys that were singled out in the awards thing they had the other day.
Yeah, that's a big deal. You want to have a great first offseason like that when you're a top 100 recruit, and they both did. Court Williams, I think, is the most interesting guy in the defense. You guys let me take him, thanks. I had come around on the idea of, is this guy going to be a linebacker? We talked a lot about Malcolm Rodriguez was a guy at Oklahoma State. Jim Knowles had said that, who was a linebacker, had been a safety at Oklahoma State, then moved to linebacker the last 2 years. Knowles was there and has the same body type as Court Williams. And I was starting to really come around. I'm like, I think this guy might be a linebacker. He's not. I'm wrong again. He was working with the safeties. He's going to be a safety, and Jim Knowles said, I like him deep. I like him diagnosing deep and getting a full view of the defense and then coming down and helping in run support. It felt like the position he was describing, this bandit strong safety basically position, is like, well, isn't that what Ronnie Hickman plays? And I was like, oh, because I had asked about Court Williams, and I was like, oh, my God, what does this mean? And then Bill Landis came in and the clouds parted, and he said, well, what about Ronnie Hickman? And Jim Knowles said, I want them both on the field. So I think the idea that Ronnie Hickman can play like a deep center field safety and Court Williams can be the strong safety, and they're both on the field. I think one of the most interesting things was it feels like they're the same kind of player, but I think they're 2 or your 3 best safeties back there if Court Williams is a safety. I feel like there's some clarity on that, and that's a really big deal. Jim Knowles had a lot of good things to say about Court Williams, just like everybody else. I feel like I took away from this, okay, Court Williams is going to be a starting safety for Ohio State this year, and it's only the first day of spring, but I thought we got some real clarity on that.
And as far as that deep safety position, Josh Proctor is back, sort of. He's in the mix. He's still kind of coming back. Obviously broke his leg last year. They said he's another guy that as they come back from spring break is going to get amped amped up, and they're going to be more and more into the practices. But a lot more to say about what's going on the defensive side of the ball on the Buckeye Talk podcast. Find that everywhere you can find a podcast, and get the text 614-350-3315. A lot of intel as soon as it was coming out of Jim Knowles' mouth, and as soon as we saw it right after practice today was going out on the text here from Buckeye Talk.